The Constitutional Court will on Monday hand down its judgment on the IEC's appeal against the Electoral Court order on former President Jacob Zuma's candidacy. The Apex Court heard arguments earlier this month on the correct interpretation of Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution, which governs who qualifies for membership of the National Assembly. The IEC's case seeks to bring finality to the correct interpretation and whether it applies to former President Jacob Zuma, who was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment for contempt in the same Apex Court. The Apex Court will also answer several questions in its judgment, including on the proper interpretation of the said section and if Zuma is disqualified from standing as a candidate for the National Assembly. What effect does a remission of sentence have on a sentence for the purposes of that section, as well as whether the Commission exceeded its powers or demonstrated a reasonable apprehension of bias when it determined the eligibility of Zuma. Judgment will be handed down at 10 a.m. on Monday. And for more on this now, we are now joined by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, who is the Director of the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University. And the Professor now joins us via our telephone line. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this evening here in SABC News. Perhaps let's start off here. I mean, we've heard the arguments in the Constitutional Court. What are your expectations when it comes to the judgment that will be handed down tomorrow?
Thank you very much, my sister, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. This is really disheartening on a number of fronts. I wish Justice Zondo and then Justice Kambembe could assist us in this regard, because it was their decisions that brought us to where we are right now. We would not have been forced to invoke Section 47(1)(e), would not have been forced to have a look at Section 35 or Section 19 of the Constitution if they had done things correctly. But then all of that is water under the bridge, because we cannot go back to that judgment. But the judgment, in fact, was one, unwarranted, and two, going straight to the Apex Court was wrong, because the decision of the Apex Court is not appealable. In making a determination, I think that the justices, when they deliver their judgment tomorrow, they will have to look at this issue holistically. For instance, one of the issues they will have to look into is whether the former president was charged of, his case was a civil matter, or if indeed it was a criminal matter. And then of course, that will inform the decision that they take. And then secondly, they will have to check if indeed it was correct for Justice Zondo to take the matter straight to the Constitutional Court and go to an extent of prescribing a sentence of 2 years, because that's what he prescribed. And then, of course, the final judgment was a 15 months, the one that was announced by Justice Kambembe, who was delivering the judgment on the day. So there are a number of issues that need to be ventilated. And then, of course, the Apex Court has to be respected, because it is the Apex Court of the land. Given that responsibility, then it means that their judgment this time around must be devoid of emotions. You recall that when Justice Kambembe delivered the judgment, I'm one of the people who raised concerns that she seems to be more emotional than basing her judgment in law. And I was looking at the manner in which she was reading the statement, to the extent of saying that the former president was the one who appointed the commission, and then now he was the one frustrating it. Forgetting that, in fact, by appointing the commission, then President Zuma was complying with a court order, not something that he voluntarily decided to do. So those are some of the dynamics which I think the court will have to consider. But then lastly, I think that the matter was not urgent in my view, because the decision that Zuma will be on the ballot paper is not an issue. The issue is whether after the election, in the event that his party Mkondo does well, if he qualifies to go to the National Assembly. My thinking is that we should have waited for that moment and then raised the issue at that point. Because when you go to the National Assembly, the list, the IEC constitutionally will prepare the list and then will submit it to the Chief Justice and then at that time those decisions are made at that particular point. I think that would have been the right time to raise the issue, not at this point. So I think those are some of the dynamics I think the court will have to ventilate and then, of course, ruminate about and then make a decision on the basis of that.
And Professor, when it comes to the confusion that this has created, what would you say this contempt of court ruling has brought about in terms of the confusion now, especially during a very crucial moment where we find ourselves just a couple of days away from the 2024 elections?
This is very sad, my sister, because it has a potential of leading to emotions rising up unnecessarily. Something that could have been easily avoided if people approached this issue in a sober manner and in a patriotic manner, because first and foremost, we want peace in this country. That's all we're interested in. As to who wins the election, it's neither here nor there. Because this is not the first nor the last election that we're going to have. We'll have many more elections. If you lose this election, it doesn't mean that you are doomed. You still have a chance to go for the local government election. You still have a chance to go to the next national and provincial government election. So I don't know why people are so hysterical about this issue, because it's unnecessary. Now, we are a few days before the election, and now we have a very significant court case, and then we're expecting our justices to deliver their judgment tomorrow. Now, depending on how the decision goes, then that will determine whether our election will go smoothly or not. Because truth be told, people right now, they are on the edge, because this election is like none other. I've heard people comparing it to the election in 1994. They are not the same. In 1994, with a different political context, right now we are in a totally different political context, and everyone is not sure as to who is going to win. So a lot is at stake this time than it was in 1994. So we didn't need this thing, honestly, in my view.
And Professor, I was coming to exactly that. I mean, you speak about peace, and we remember when that contempt of court ruling was handed down and what it did in this country during those 2021 July unrests. And, looking at the ruling that we are expecting tomorrow, do you think that it has the potential to destabilize the political climate, especially now during such a crucial moment?
Indeed, it does, depending on how the decision will go. If, in fact, I was one of the justices, I'll put the country first, of course, abiding within the parameters of the law. What this would mean is that, first of all, this case is not urgent. So let's put it aside, let's go for the election, see how the election goes, then we'll attend to this matter at a later stage. That way you'll be able to contain emotions without necessarily defying the Constitution, without also relegating your responsibility as the justices of the High Court, of the apex court of the land, that is the Constitutional Court. So I think that right now everyone is sitting on the edge, waiting for this judgment. If I were to decide on this matter, I would say that, one, the matter is not urgent. Two, we'll wait because the elections are around the corner. Let's allow the elections to run smoothly. And then if there is anything, we'll look into that. Once parties have performed in the elections, we know how they performed. The IEC will compile the list as it normally does, and it does it efficiently. And then it takes the list to the justice of the court. This is basically Chief Justice Zondo. And then before people are sworn in, then you invoke whatever other section you think of. To look into the extent to which former President Zuma is in fact barred from going to the National Assembly as per Section 47(1)(e). And then look at all the other dynamics I've just alluded to at the beginning. That way, you will have put the country first, you would have respected the Constitution, you would have respected the law, and then, of course, everything would go smoothly. That is what I think they should do if they're serious about their love for this country and their respect for the Constitution, which is their responsibility.
And should the Constitutional Court rule in the favor of former President Jacob Zuma? I mean, one would ask how much of a threat then would be former President Jacob Zuma, particularly to the ANC, just a few days away from the elections?
You know, my sister, that question does not arise. Because whether the court rules in favor of former President Zuma or it doesn't rule against the MK party. The MK party is one of the contenders in this election. That will not change, regardless of whatever decision that the court takes. So that's why I was saying that it puzzles me why people are so hysterical about this thing. Because even if you were to remove Zuma from from going to parliament, but you're not removing him from canvassing for the party and then garnering support for the party. So what purpose are you serving? So for me, it doesn't really matter. The only worry for me is that if then the court says that you must not go to parliament because of section 47(1)(e), that will prolong the discussion. Of course, no one can take it to court because the Constitutional Court is the apex court. But then it will lead to emotions rising up unnecessarily, as I've already said. But I don't think this is necessary because, as I say, MK party will be participating in this election. And if they win, it's up to the MK party and to the former president to decide whether he wants to go to parliament or not. So why worry about something that has not happened? And even if it were to happen, we are not going to see this country collapsing. So why worry ourselves about all of that?
All right, Professor, thank you so much for that insight. That is Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, Director of the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University.